Welcome to Learning Leaders Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your guest host, Tracy D. Lufkin, and I'm a relationship manager with Training Pros, the sponsor of this podcast. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company. We like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us help you find the best consultant to start your project with confidence. Today, I would like to introduce you to an amazing learning executive, Tammy Vetter, from a large healthcare company. She's the Assistant Vice President of Learning and Organizational Effectiveness. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you for the invitation, Tracy D. So happy to be here.
Can you share with our audience a 60-second interview or overview, of what you do?
Absolutely. So we have 32,000 employees. And so my focus has been on leadership development. And in fact, we just rolled out a new platform where we looked at the needs of leaders at 3 different levels and identified required and recommended courses for them. And that was 3,800 leaders. We rolled that out to between November and January. So we're still working on that. I'm also responsible for a platform for 32,000 leaders that 32,000 associates that offers professional development. And so that's a few years old. So we're always excited about integrating that in other programs. And of course, during COVID, because our leaders were focusing on taking care of the community, we really spent more time supporting human resources because we're a center of excellence for human resources. And they were standing up multiple platforms. For example, a whole new performance management philosophy and practice and technology. So we supported that. Over the summer, we're going to be rolling out a new mentoring platform, and I'm also responsible for some physician development work that we're working on as well.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
You guys have a fairly large team to help you, I hope.
No, actually, I have a small team. I think the beauty of organizational effectiveness is that we have multiple areas that we focus on. So I'm able to pull in some resources. And then because we work at a very large organization, I work with lots of different functions. And so people are matrix to our projects. So for example, the leadership platform we just rolled out, that actually was 100 different people that supported that project and were brought in for their specialty, whether it's IT support, whether it was communication support. And certainly that is a long project cycle. So that was about a year and a half to get that up and running.
Wow. Well, the cross collaboration is key then, and especially in an organization your size.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful to have those relationships and the support across the system. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, that'll set you up for success for sure.
Yes.
So I'm curious, tell me what about L&D first attracted you to this field?
Yeah. So even as a little girl, when I was bored, my mom always said, go read a book, right? And so I had that experience. And when I ended up going to graduate school, my degree was in industrial organizational psychology, and I was the president of the ATD chapter there. And I think what really made a difference for me and attracted me to learning was that I loved the idea of dealing with people's potential and seeing the excitement that they have when they get it, and when they surpass their own goals, or they see things a different way, or they get that spark in their eye that makes a huge difference to their career. And when it comes to leadership development, one of the things that I have always held on to is that great leaders make great spouses, they make great parents, they make great community members. So when we make a difference in their skill set, it doesn't just stop at work. It really does impact their whole life. And I think that being able to witness that is such a powerful gift that comes from learning.
I love that. Yeah, to bring that in, great leaders make just great human beings. It's wonderful,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And they're always changing and growing too, right? I mean, hopefully, we're always changing and growing.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Yes.
So I'm curious as well about the what with your experience and because you've been in L&D how many years now?
Well, the first 15 years of my career was in human resources.
That's right.
And I accepted an assignment that was for business transformation, for change management and communication. And so that in that during that 1 year assignment, I actually trained over 1,000 leaders and associates on change management because we were going through so much. And so when I came out of graduate school, I wasn't able to find a job in learning. So I went traditional human resources, and I'm so glad I did because it gave me a lot of insight and the
Mhm.
ability to work with human resources. And I had a lot of experience coaching leaders, right? And so now we make solutions for leaders and learning for leaders. And I often draw on that experience in the past.
Oh, that's a great foundation.
Yeah, I would say the last 15 years, I've been focusing on leadership development, learning in general, change management, and organizational development.
Oh, that's great. So then the question is with all that background and experience, and especially the last 15 years, what are the most impactful changes you've seen in L&D in the last few years?
Yeah. Wow, there's just been a lot of change, first of all, right? And there will continue to be a lot of change. So I think the first change that I've seen a lot is AI. And I read a recent study by McKinsey, and they said by 2030, that 70% of our typical business activities will be automated through AI, which is it's staggering, right? I mean, it's almost hard to put your wrap your mind around that. So let's say it's even 35%. Let's just go half. That is a huge impact in terms of what we're doing in learning, right? Because a lot of what we do in learning is focused on knowledge transfer, skill transfer. And so if a lot of that will be automated, I think our shift needs to be to focusing on how we can help our leaders and associates think about integrating information, how we can project manage, um, how we can think about our organization and start with AI and then add on our industry knowledge, our organizational knowledge. So I think that's a big shift that continues to impact us. The second thing is the use of phones. So, and this is one thing that often comes up in topics. Just a few years ago, using phones to deliver learning was kind of optional, right? Because it would either be classroom or it would be virtual, but we didn't really think about the phone as the learning device.
Yeah,
But now, oftentimes it is.
it is.
And so thinking about how the content looks on the phone, you have a much smaller screen. So being able to absorb, thinking through how much people actually want to scroll. Certainly the phones have impacted our attention spans too.
Yes.
So also, how much are you really going to say? How can you say it in a short way? Can you use infographics in a way where before it was a long text? Those types of things. And then I think the other big impact to learning has been social media. And so if you think about all the different ways now that we get information, so Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, it's a lot more
A
than
lot.
it used to be, which used to be books, experts, and research, right? Those three things were the three things.
Hmm.
So the younger people, but us too, we're looking for information fast and we find it in lots of different sources. And so we saw the rise of influencers. And so I think when it comes to the learning perspective, thinking through how we can use testimonials because that's what Gen X is kind of looking for, testimonials, champions, how we can connect people socially to talk about the content, especially if they're learning in an asynchronous way. I think those three things, so AI, social media, and the use of phones have really changed how we do business and learning, and will continue to.
Yeah, they really have. And so kind of building on that, thinking about those changes, where do you see the L&D space headed in the next 5 to 10 years?
I recently listened to a podcast that Ryan Jenkins was talking about. He was talking about the different generations. So I think for the first time, we're going to have more generations than ever, right, in the workplace. And his research showed that Gen Z is 79% more likely to report that they are sometimes or always feel disconnected at work, which is twice as much as the older generations. And if you really think about it, it's kind of interesting because you would
Yeah.
think that they are the most connected,
Mhm.
right? But he talks about the difference between communication and connection and really suggests that we need to do everything we can to replace communication, which might be a one-way text, with connection.
I
And so when it
remember.
comes to learning, if you think about, well, I mean, earlier I talked a little bit about the need to switch to some of those softer skills or what traditionally was thought of softer skills. Those are the skills that will support connection. So one of the things that we're doing, especially over the next few months, is focusing more and more on human-centered leadership. So what can we do to help our leaders develop the qualities of empathy, authenticity, and adaptability? And if you think about it, those three qualities are foundational to feeling included, valued, seen as a person, appreciated. So the challenge that we're working on right now, or I'm working on right now, is how can you take those qualities and create behaviors that make people feel that way, right? So most leaders, I think at the end of the day, they want to know what to do differently. And so being able to articulate that and then show, connecting it to the impact that you want to have, which would be increased engagement and retention.
Agreed. Yes, and that 79% just doing what you are talking about through human-centered leadership, that should drop dramatically, we hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's face it, it's not just that generation. I think we all want to feel that way, right? We all want to feel that we matter and the work that we do in the workplace makes a difference.
Exactly. I think so too. And so that's why there's so many organizations I see going towards that centered leadership, which is important.
Yes, and there was one other stat he mentioned, which I thought was also interesting about that generation, and it was from LinkedIn, and they surveyed 14,000 workers. And Gen Z, the things that they wanted the most, the first in the workplace was that work-life balance, and the second thing was learning and development. And so I think that this is kind of interesting too, because we're seeing research that that generation is trading a bigger paycheck for more time with their family and relationships and pursuing their interests. So again, that idea of connection is coming back for them,
It is.
right? And so making sure that we create environments that support that and then develop the skills for leaders and associates, right? For both to understand how to foster that connection. And then when it came to the learning and development, they said that they were more looking for skill development because they view themselves as free agents as opposed to people who are going to stay long term and develop careers. I think from an organizational perspective, we always want to retain great people, right? Because we want to create
Yes.
that bench strength. We want to make sure that they're getting what they need. And that will always be a longer term goal. But we can't, I think, underestimate that if they are most interested in skill development, you don't want to lose them because you're focusing on the long term and not delivering on the short term.
Mm,
So helping them develop skills and to be able to articulate what's in it for them is going to be key.
agreed. And we are so lucky to be in this learning and development space and being able to
Yes,
influence that over this next 5 to 10 years. So that's exciting.
absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's getting back to that potential, right? And one of the things that I always feel really lucky about is the stories that leaders tell us about how they've used what they learned and what a difference that made.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
to hear those. The stories are what we learn from. I think a lot of people learn from the easiest is to hear those stories and connect with it, connection again.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So with that in mind, here's a fun question. If you had 10 times your current budget, where would you spend it?
Sure. So I think the very first thing I would do is I would be looking for platforms that are scalable, that come with off-the-shelf content, and that have the ability for social connection built in. I think that that is so important for the short term and the long term. Um, I would even say if there's any hoping that they have built-in metrics that can help you articulate the value and the investment is also very important. Secondly, I would look for opportunities across your organization to partner with other functions like performance improvement, marketing, product development. What technologies are they identifying that they believe will make a difference? And then see if you can share both the cost and the risk of piloting some of that. Because you're going to learn more about the business. You really are there to support the business and your clients. And being able to try things out in a way that minimizes risk, I think is really key too, so that you always have this constant innovation that's going on rather than being the last one to the party, so to speak. It's always helpful. And I think you can also do that if you can't do that from a financial perspective, capitalizing on the new functionality that's already being rolled out in the systems that you do own and looking for partners to pilot that with that can be a great way to establish your value and spend that money because chances are every year, if you have some of those platforms that you have multi-year contracts, you need to demonstrate value every year,
Yes, you do.
right? Something above and beyond what you currently deliver.
Hmm.
And then the last thing I would say is making sure that you develop the skills of your team members so that they have a broad spectrum of skills that they are getting opportunities to learn things that are aligned with their interests, right? Again, with
Yes.
what they see themselves as being, and sending them externally to conferences, not only learning conferences, but it can also be
Right.
industry conferences.
Sure.
And you send people outside not only to learn, but to be inspired. I don't know about you, but I feel sometimes we focus so much on the deadlines and delivering value and what's on our plate today that it's not always possible to look up from the day to day and develop those relationships with people who are similarly situated. And having those conversations makes you feel like you're not alone in terms of what you're experiencing. But it's amazing to me that those informal conversations can spur the best idea. You hear something from somebody else and you go home and you think about it more and then all of a sudden it becomes the next thing.
Sure.
And so giving yourself time and your team to experience that serendipity, I think is so important, you know?
Well, and especially in this virtual world, many of
Yes,
us work from home and, you don't have someone just stopping by your desk to chat anymore. So you really have to put a little more effort into stopping and, like you said, kind of being in that moment, being present to think about something else or someone else or another initiative and check up on that. And that engages with that other team member to start those
absolutely.
conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're right, right? And that again gets back to the connectedness.
Exactly. Yes. So you mentioned skills, and it's really important to focus on those skills and up-level the skills. Is there a certain skill or role that is hardest for you to find talent for right now?
So the hardest role for me to find talent in is project managers or program managers. And I think that has a lot to do with sometimes I feel like I'm looking for a unicorn because I not only want them to be well versed in learning theory and adult learning theory, but they also need to be able to manage large scale projects. Our projects run anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, maybe longer. And they entail a lot of different things. So, stakeholder management, figuring out what your metrics are, even the ability to manage scope creep, right? The longer your project is, the more likely scope creep, they're more likely to have some curveballs that come your way. And so, somebody who has the skills to be able to understand what the impact of the curveball is, to be able to minimize that, to be able to think through how to communicate to different stakeholders, even how to manage the change, which, if you think about it, all learning is change.
It
And
is.
so understanding change management and how you can apply those principles to your project. One really simple thing is studies show that people need to hear things 7 times.
Mhm.
And so thinking about how you're going to deliver that same message in 7 different ways or 7 different ways over time, or articulating the message in different ways, or even crafting the message so that it is repeatable by people who you're not talking to. A lot of the things that we do, we hand off to our human resources partners, and they are the face of that. And so being able to even make it easy for them,
Sure.
intuitive, and then continuing to have that conversation with them so that we understand how we can adapt, right? What you think at the beginning of the project may change, right? As you go in the project.
The scope creep.
Yes. And then I also think a project or a program manager being able to think through at the front end, how am I going to measure success? Having those really hard conversations about what success looks like, right? And anything you need to avoid. And then also being able to select the right group to pilot and making sure that that you create an environment where they are comfortable giving you positive feedback, but more importantly, constructive feedback. And being able to check in during the pilot. So if there's anything that you need to address, you can, because you want them to have a positive experience. And then doing a check in at the end to think about how you can incorporate that to make it a positive experience for all. So choosing that pilot group so that it's a reflection of your true audience, also very important too.
Agreed. Yeah, they've got to be able to have the time, first of all, to
Mhm.
participate and feel comfortable providing that constructive feedback. And so giving them the title of champion or whatever it is or stakeholder is key too. And now I see why that project manager role is such a unicorn role for you because they have to be able to do all of that and have an L&D background really
Yes.
to know how to keep things rolling.
Absolutely. And you know what? To understand, if you think about learning on a continuum where one end is just almost straight communication, and on the other end is a very complex offering. So maybe it's multiple events, maybe it's gaming, maybe it's traditional classroom. Understanding what the needs are, and then understanding how much time you have, right? Which sometimes, and the resources you have to deliver, and trying to figure out where on that continuum you're going to meet the needs and do it on time, on budget, with the resources you have.
Exactly. It's always the challenge for sure. Well, let's shift a little bit here, Tammy. What is your favorite source of industry news and information? I know you're an avid book reader, so we'll save that question for next. But what is your favorite source for industry news and information?
Sure. So, of course, ATD, which is like training development now. I really like trainingindustry.com. They have a phenomenal list of podcasts. It's called I think it's the ultimate list of podcasts. It's like over 50 podcasts that you can
Oh,
listen. And in fact, they did some research on podcasts in 2022. They found that there were over 700,000 podcasts out there. So thinking about how you can also incorporate that into pre-work or post-work is also important. Harvard Business Review, certainly LinkedIn. I would also say Becker Hospital Review, which is specific to healthcare. And then I can't underscore enough how important it is to ask people who are coming up in the workforce, what are they listening to? What do they experience? What do they like? And for example, for myself, I talk to my son, he's in college, and it's interesting how they get information. It's no longer them just looking at the expert, the book, or research. They look at lots of different things. And so finding out what the latest thing is, why they like it, why they don't like it. And then even say, I even asked my son, I was like, how do you know that that's a trustworthy source? Right. So, like asking some of
great
those
question.
questions, right, is also
Hmm.
important to sort of uncover that. And you can have those kinds of conversations with young people in your life that maybe you might not completely be able to have in the workplace. So I really encourage everyone to continue to talk to their kids or the other young people in their lives.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I have a college age son as well, and I often say, "Do you what have you looked at multiple sources?" Right? Because that's
Yeah.
the other thing too. There's so much out there that on TikTok or whatever it may be that well, have you validated this somewhere else? No, but it's definitely interesting conversations. And I wanted to, for our listeners, I just wanted to go back and mention the ultimate podcast list
That's
with
good.
trainingindustry.com. I think that's a great resource for them to find all those podcasts on. Hopefully this will be on there as well
Yes. Yes.
at some point. So Tammy, what is since you are an avid reader, I'm really interested to hear what is the one book that everyone wanting to move into L&D L&D leadership should read.
Okay. Can I do 3 books?
Okay.
Okay. So, let me grab these. So my first one, I think for any business leader, it's The First 90 Days, and that is by Michael Watkins.
Oh,
This is
yes.
an older book, but it is great because it talks about how to identify the strategic relationships that you need to create across an organization. So I think that is key, especially for learning, because we serve the organization. A lot of times we're the ones who are supposed to address the skill gaps between what is today and what needs to be.
Mhm.
Or we're also doing training for clients and that you need to build rapport. So to me, that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is this book called Managing Projects. It's by Lou Russell. She is the best author on how to do learning projects. And in her book, she talks about what the difference is between what you plan and the reality, right? And we all know
Oh, yes.
no project is perfect. And so
No.
she does a fantastic job of that. She does a great job of presenting tools. And I saw her present at ATD, and I just thought she was fantastic, great sense of humor. And she also incorporates that into her book. So fantastic.
Check that one out, definitely.
Mhm. And the last one is Smart Brevity. And this is by the co-creators of Axios and Politico. So that's Jim Vandeheim, Mike Allen, and Roy Schwartz. And they talk about how to take our messages and make them as concise as possible. And they show before and after. So everything from emails to checklists to all types of things. And so these two books, we did this as a book club a couple years ago on our team. We started doing this one as a book club. We had to stop because we had a hot and heavy project, but we are going to start up again.
The smart Monday.
We even start some of our team meetings with putting up, I don't know, 20-word sentences and say, okay, the challenge is boil it down to 7 because it's a
Mm,
muscle that we need to practice, right?
yes. Agreed.
And it's a lot easier to get better at it when it's fun than when you're under the gun, right? And so it's a great
Agreed.
book. It's actually a great book for any leader, but especially for learning and thinking about how to communicate what you need to communicate.
Yes, I agree. And just to recap for our, since this may be on audio only, the book you were showing, it was Smart Brevity. And the
Yes,
other book you were showing was the
managing projects. Yeah,
Managing Projects.
yeah.
And
Lou
those are the two
Russell.
you were talking through.
Yeah,
Very informative. Thank you.
sure
Well,
thing.
thank you so much for appearing on the show today.
Absolutely. So glad
I
to
have,
be here. It's a real pleasure, Tracy D. And again, I appreciate the invitation.
well, I've learned so much. So I want to express my sincere thanks. And as a gift to you for being on the show, we're going to plant 5 trees in your name.
Amen.
Our charity at Training Pros is planting trees around the world, and we've planted over 3,500 trees to date. So we'll plant 5 trees in your name and send you a certificate showing you where they're planted. And it's just our way of just letting you know how much we appreciate you.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad that you're doing that as an organization and making a difference. And of course, I so appreciate the opportunity. And I look forward to seeing the certificate too. So thank you.
Great. And that's this episode of Learning Leaders Spotlight.